There are so many factors that impact the well-being of law enforcement officers, from wellness topics and developmental content to organizational expectations and social connections. RippleWorks solves that problem by providing anonymous check-ins, so each officer can get exactly what they need and want for prime performance, while agencies learn in real time how their people are doing through analytic dashboards. Take a look at RippleWorks today at www.rippleworks.com and schedule a demo. That's rippleworks.com. When you don't know how a recruit's really doing until week 10, that's a problem. TrackWired's field training management software replaces old school paperwork with a clean, automated system. Streamlined reporting, knowledge comprehension, and crystal clear performance trends, all handled in one secure place. TrackWire gives you real-time insight into their field training process so supervisors get real-time visibility. FTOs save hours and recruits stay on track. If you want to tighten up your FTO program, start by going to trackwire.com. That's tracwire.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to another episode. And today I have a quick and gritty episode. This is based on a listener question, so I am just going to throw it out there. And I have some responses from followers, listeners on this from the social medias. So it is integrating some of your insights from experience, but also some of my perspective from my experience. The question is, what should people be aware of? What are tips for an officer who is going to be lateraling from a small, slower town to a bigger, busy agency? And whereas I have not lateraled, I have seen a lot of examples of when people are doing things well and when people are not doing things well. I saw it from a field training perspective. I saw it as a peer officer. You see it in training, working in the training unit, hiring, recruiting. I saw it as a street sergeant and on, right, to my current role even. So there's a lot of dynamics that are absolutely universal for people changing in their department, in where they call home, right? Slapping a new patch on, it's not exactly the same. But then there's also a lot of dynamics that might be a little different, going from small, slow to bigger, fast. And it's not always that way, but we're just going to get into it. I want to feature some of the listener/follower feedback first, because I think that it's super relevant and it ties into 5 points that I've outlined. And there's definitely a lot of interplay there. So first off, Jason Lehman, if you know Jason, shout out. But if you don't, look out his social. He's a contributor to so much positivity in critically what police need. He's been on the podcast before, Why'd You Stop Me, former cop. So check him out. But he brings up pretty quick that in bigger agencies, a lot of times there's a different level of politics. From working in this industry for so long, I would agree that there are these large scale politics. However, politics are kind of everywhere. There's some flavor or degree of politics. But I think what will go into other responses and feedback is that you got to know the landscape, right? Be aware of things. And we'll get more into what to do about that or how to navigate that. And I love how he said this very clearly, got to stay humble and hungry. And if you've been listening for a while or reading along, or whether it's the articles or social media, you know that that's one of my personal mottos, because alliteration is awesome, but also, just stay hungry and humble. Those two things are two sides of the coin. You want them in balance. You want both, right? You don't want that tenacity. You want to build that confidence, but also you want to be aware that you're keeping that ego at a healthy level, right? It's not about destroying the ego. Ego helps us do some amazing, powerful things, believe in ourselves to do them, but it is keeping that in check. Pistolero disciple, retired cop as well. The world is your oyster. He talks about big agencies having so many opportunities and specializations, and also a lot of turnover, right, within the agencies, transfers, things like that, and also just people leaving because things are big compared to a small agency, which sometimes people just occupy a seat for a long time. It's not really a bad thing. It just is sometimes, right? So if there are only so many, rank promotions and people have some good amount of career left, then that seat's not going to open up, without growth for the jurisdiction and for the department. So that is a little bit of brass tacks that he flips this into like a positive, right? Like, so look at the perspective, and by doing the first, right, staying hungry and humble, you can put yourself in position for those opportunities. Doug White, who has also been on the show, retired LEO, speaker, author, just general badass, positive dude, talks about knowing the climate. Okay, so again, we're getting into the politics that can take on so many different flavors. It could be the literal political landscape, but also just the dynamics, right? Without getting deeper into it. But with that, his lived and learned insight is to stay true to your code and purpose. Large agencies can lose track of you, the individual, and just thing, but also you can kind of get lost in that minutia as well. Certainly not only large, busier agencies. We see a lot of, we'll just call them issues and challenges in small, medium, whatever agency, right? We know that there's no size of agency that equals better culture. There's absolute successes and success stories at every size and every type of agency, organization, and there's absolute failures, again, in any type of environment, climate, size. So shout out to Doug White also talking about the importance of family and self, because just generally with any career, like, you can get lost in that. You can lose perspective of what the main purpose is. Like, we are doing this all for, sure, this thing outside of ourselves, but we are really doing it for our family. And so we can be a contributing part of that. And one cannot sacrifice the other, right? So if you've been listening to this for a while, you know that it is about the big picture. It is about crossing the finish line with your health and wealth. And that takes so many forms and flavors. It is not just about accomplishing the goal at all costs, and those costs being your family and yourself. That is not a success. That is not what we need more of in law enforcement. We have plenty of examples where, not disparagingly, but that does not serve the individual, the family, or the department. Truly, it does not. So we got to balance that stuff. Michael brought this up. I'll just say it. It ties into some things that I kind of nodded at, which is beware that bigger is not better necessarily, right? He's talking about cops, their proficiency, their quality, and their training performance. So performance and then like in training. And thus that correlates with their performance on the street, which I would absolutely agree with, right? There are some departments, again, there's some correlation, not causation. There are some departments with amazing resources, amazing dynamics, organization, structures, culture, where they are just training and they have a lot of systems and people, funding, time allocated to do these things. There are other really large departments that are so bureaucratic that it's like you're trained to the lowest common denominator, and it doesn't equal actual like training or actual learning development. It might just be checking a box and going through the motions. So that is something to be aware of. Just don't assume that because you come from a small, slower place that you're not squared away. Practice that introspection. Look at the community, the region at large. Look at ways that you can compare yourself. Iron sharpens iron, but unless you even get close to any other chunks of metal, you don't know how you stand up, how robust you are, how sharp you are. And so there's a metaphor there, but hopefully you're hearing that translates into like, how good of a cop are you? And if you're just existing in your little bubble, in your little echo chamber without resources like training outside, without interacting with regional cops in the area, without going to trainings, without reading, without watching videos and breakdowns, really developing yourself, then how will you know? And Jake Holmes responds with this buckle up buttercup, right? And so I believe he's talking about the pace, and sometimes, that's super relevant. We have a lot of people that they're ready for something bigger and something different, and oh man, that's a tough, steep learning curve. Some people hit it hard and they start pedaling faster and they catch up, or they jump in and they paddle like crazy and they learn and grow so fast. Like, I know, and I've seen up close and personal, a lot of amazing lateral candidates. They came from that agency where nothing happens, like literally nothing happens, but they were developing themselves and taking on different roles and hats and challenges, whatever they could find. And then when they came to, my agency or one like it, yeah, they had a steep learning curve, but they were absolutely capable and they're soaring still. Others that thought that this would be just basically the same, just a little busier and better pay, whatever. Stark, rough awakening. And I've seen many not succeed with the agency or with that career move. So we went through a few things, and these will absolutely plug into the list of 5 things that I had kind of outlined. But the first one is to stay humble and open-minded. So you heard some versions of that, but what we're talking about here is one of the biggest pet peeves, not just for field trainers or supervisors, bosses, but really peers, right? Anyone that's working alongside this person. And that is, back at blank department, we used to, or I used to, and it's kind of that like know-it-all / me monster. And sometimes it's like a personal awareness thing. Maybe they're not that cocky, and maybe they're not really intending to come off that way. Sometimes it's out of nervousness or trying to, I guess, develop and share this credibility. And I'll get into some other prongs here, but it's know thyself, right? So work on your introspection, work on your EQ, and when in doubt, just lean more toward the humble, open-minded, curious thing, because there's a lot that you might know, and there's a lot, like all of us, we don't know. So hit the pause button, observe, reflect, listen, like truly listen to the lessons, the feedback you're getting, plug them away. And in the right opportunities, when you have the right rapport, when you understand a little bit of the dynamics, whether it's your trainer or your peer or your sarge, then find the opportunity to discuss or ask questions, right? Very different if I hear how you do things and I get this debrief and what I could have done different and get this breakdown and I say, oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. And I ask questions as to, okay, so when you said this, do you mean this? Or what do you mean by that? Okay, cool. And then I might be able to find a way to share some of how I was looking at it based on what I have seen before. Not because it's better, not because anything like that, but just insert it there rather than, as opposed to just saying, well, I see what you're saying, but I mean, we don't like those but statements, right? So that's enough of the first one. This goes right into the second one, which is be mindful of your relationships. So what do I mean by that? Exactly like what we started, or I suppose ended with, which is rapport. So you need to get to know the people that you're around because you are the new kid on the block. It's taking time to realize that quality relationships aren't built overnight. You are the new guy or gal. So by being humble, by being inquisitive, by being curious, open-minded, just be that sponge, right? And that will set you up to have that positive interaction in relationship, and reputation will be cemented in a positive way really quickly. We all know first impressions are huge. We all know that bad first impressions are really difficult to rework, remold. So be mindful of that and really try to make it about how you can be an asset, right? How you can show value, prove value to these people around you, and then develop that relationship, right? What better way to develop a relationship than for people to be like, huh, great work ethic, huh, great attitude. They're curious about me and what's going on in my life. Cool. I'm going to be curious and see what's going on in their life too, because they're not just, someone that's on probation and we're going to see if they work out or not. No, they seem like a really solid person that's really inquisitive and wants to do well here, right? So I'm not going to belabor that anymore. Number 3 would be learn the culture and policies, right? Police work at its root core, very similar in what the mission is, but how we go about it is so unique, right? And that breaks down to types of agencies. Maybe you're going to a federal big agency, but the scope is different. The priorities might be interpreted differently. How you interpret concepts might be different, right? Officer safety might be a little bit more general and similar. However, you might be going from an agency where quote unquote officer safety looks really different than where you're ending up, right? Maybe this type of call requires this type of response, and where you're going, they don't have that kind of response. And I know that sometimes when we go with the original question of like bigger might be more cops around, it might be bigger agency where you're super spread out and you're not getting the level of backup and resources that you're accustomed to in even your small town, because you get all these other small town entities around you, right? So just to be aware of the how you do things, which is culture, not like, this goes beyond why you do things. It is the how you do things. So learn that, again, building off the prior ones by being open-minded and humble in your approach. And the best way that you do that without seeming egotistical or like a know-it-all is just to stay curious, right? Adopt that and present that curious mindset by asking questions. There is such thing as a stupid question, but if you know where to find the answer in practical time, then find it. But don't clam up. You could even seem like you're put off and you're not engaging. So don't hold on to every question wondering if it's a stupid question, but just if you know you could find it pretty easily, then just find it and vary who you ask, right? And sometimes that's even explained, right? Like don't hit up the sarge for everything, hit up the senior officer. And that's where the relationships come back in, because some people will make it very clear quickly that they are there to help you. And that is a sign of a really positive, solid culture. Show competence without ego. So this does play off of prior conversations and points that I've made. It is wanting to show confidence and competence, but not like a know-it-all. How do you do that? Well, you don't act like you don't know anything. You clearly have been a cop for a while. That's why you got hired. That's hopefully why you are seen as more of an asset. So how do you do that? You work your butt off, right? You come in with this awesome attitude. If they're looking for a volunteer and maybe you're already out of field training. If you're on field training, usually the FTO will look at you or volunteer you, but be first, right? So how about this? Like before you even look and exchange glances with your FTO, with the moment a sergeant says, "Hey, I need someone for a transport detail," you shoot your hand up and say, maybe while looking at your FTO to check, like, "Hey, we could do that," unless your FTO is like, "No, we got other plans today." And maybe you have the relationship established where you know what your FTO wants, and maybe they would prefer to speak up. But the point is you're eager and ready, right? You're willing, you're not looking away, you're leaning forward, your chin's up, you're like, "Hey, I'm ready to take on that thing." When you get on scene, maybe a different officer is talking to the victim. You don't ask, man, this translates to so many active cops as well, right? But you don't ask, with your hands in your pockets. By the way, don't put your hands in your pockets. You don't ask like 5-10 minutes into the interview, like, "Hey, by the way, you need anything? Like, is there anything I could do before I clear off?" No, that's a very different question than saying, "What can I do? What needs to be done? I'm going to do it." Or how about this? Rather than like, "Hey, do you got it? Can I take primary? I'm the new guy." Like, say, "Hey, are you too far in? I'd like to take primary. I'd like to take primary unless you want this and you got it." And if they're like, "No, I got it," because they're solid and they're already into it, and say, "Cool, what can I start working on for you? What needs to be documented? Who needs to be talked to?" Right? Witnesses vapor. You can take pictures of stuff oftentimes a little bit later, but don't don't volunteer for just the dumb things like, "Oh, do you need photos? Do you need crime scene tape? Cool, I'm going to be at my car for like 5 minutes getting out this tape, untangling it from my jumper cables." Do something meaningful. Show that you care. Show that you're driven. Volunteer for the crap details. Volunteer for the heavy lifting, the confounded, complicated cases, so you can show your worth, right? First part is attitude. The second part is aptitude. So when you do take that on, now you can demonstrate, no, I'm not just some new guy from a smaller town. Like, I know how to write. I know how to investigate cases. I know how to chase leads. And here's my case report. Here's all the I's dotted. Here's all the T's crossed. FTO's super impressed, and your reputation is taking off. Not because you inserted all these opportunities to tell somebody what you know and what you can do, but because you showed them. And that is the huge, huge, huge key difference. How do you show competence without ego? Actions, not words. And maybe that should have been the title as I get into explaining it. Focus on actions, not words. And that is a lesson in a topic that could translate to anything, right? Not about laterals, not about being the new person, but being the adequate, or not how about not adequate? How about the proficient, optimal leader at whatever rank or role you're at? And the last thing, to keep this relatively on point, be patient. Okay, so that's be patient with growth, be patient with all these dynamics. You might be in that uphill climb, right? You're trying to change gears. You're barely changing it fast enough so you don't fall off that bike to hit that proverbial hill, but stay patient with it. Take the time, build the reps, invest the resources and the energy and the bandwidth. Some of that, as when you were new, hopefully people are doing this, but when you are new, you need to take time outside of the job to get good at stuff. I mean, shoot, it's not just when you're new. Any cop that I know that is a fantastic cop, he might have really good work-life boundaries, by the way, but they are investing a lot of time and energy to make themselves better. It might not be working a ton of overtime. It might not be reading all the latest police books that they see on social media, but they are reading. They are studying, maybe not specific police stuff, but life. They are learners. They are working out. They are investing in relationships. Like, they are working to get better because those all make you a better cop, right? They're not just Netflix, binge watching, scrolling, and all their time off and time on, right? They are pushing the pace to get better. And that stuff takes patience to grow. But it's also recognizing that career progression might reset. Okay. So I know I've seen it in my agency where it was a very minor reset, right? So I know people that left rank, right, to be officers again. Sometimes it's budget, sometimes it's because of glass ceilings, what have you. But when they come back and they've demonstrated all the things that I've discussed and shared about, and in quick time, sometimes even on probation, they are put into that specialty unit, right? They're put on the tactical team. They're put in investigations, maybe still on probation. They're allowed to test for supervisory roles. I've seen that in multiple departments because of the need and or because of the aptitude of the candidate, right? Because they were so experienced and it would be a no-brainer to let them go. Or maybe it's not even probation for testing for rank, but maybe it's an exclusion or a waiver for the 3-year or whatever the rule is. But absolutely, that's why a lot of people make the shift, right? That's why a lot of people are going and uprooting is for opportunity. Those opportunities don't happen overnight. And sometimes when I see them stall is when one of these tenets was not followed, right? It became too much about what I know and how I'm going to talk about it, even if they meant well, because I don't know, I'm not in their head, but how it was received was not well. And how it was received was egotistical, all talk, self-promoting, what have you, right? So if you mind all of these things in conjunction and recognize the interplay, then you can absolutely make sure that you're coming off in a healthy, accepted way so that you can do your work by actions, build a solid reputation while you're investing and researching and learning the hard facts like policy and the intangible things like culture. And so that is the crash course of tips for laterals. The main question was talking about going from small to large agency, but really you'll probably hear how this is applicable to any laterals, but really also applicable to people changing precincts, changing units, changing assignment, changing crews, changing in their roles. Maybe it's rank. Maybe it's you could take all these things, bottle them up for your new sergeant or your provisional sergeant. You could take them all in as you switch from being the commander of this division to that division. So it really just comes down to how do you adapt to a new challenge really well? And you can absolutely apply all these things. So thank you so much for listening. Thanks for the questions and the input. Many of you that commented in on social media platforms. And with that, I will leave you to stay well and stay gritty. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.